to announce some major changes in U.S. policy. Mr. Trump making surprise comments on nuclear weapons, military jets, and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict 4 weeks before the inauguration. CNN's Boris Sanchez is live at Trump's vacation estate in Mar-a-Lago with more on all of this. Hi, Boris.
Hey there, Allison. Yeah, anyone who thought that Donald Trump might tone down his tweets after the election was proven wrong yesterday. The president-elect taking to Twitter with some very questionable comments about American policy overseas, and now the conversation continues about the way that Donald Trump handles his Twitter account. President-elect Donald Trump shaking up international relations weeks before taking the oath of office. On Twitter, Trump tweeting that the U.S. must greatly strengthen and expand its nuclear capability until the world comes to its senses regarding nukes, bucking almost 50 years of historical precedent against nuclear proliferation. This pledge coming hours after Vladimir Putin spoke about strengthening Russia's arsenal, prompting concerns about the possibility of a reignited nuclear arms race.
It's difficult to know what to make of it all. We're committed to our New START obligations with Russia and to, again, maintaining a strong, modernized nuclear deterrent here in the United States.
Trump's team attempting to clarify the president-elect's tweet hours later, saying that he actually meant he wants to prevent the threat of nuclear proliferation, the opposite of what he initially tweeted. Trump also openly undermining President Obama and signaling a major shift in diplomatic policy in another unprecedented move via social media, calling for the Obama administration to veto a UN Security Council resolution condemning Israeli settlement activity just hours before the scheduled vote. A senior Israeli official telling CNN the Israeli government reached out to Trump directly, asking him to intervene. Egyptian President Abdel al-Sisi putting the vote on hold after taking a call from the president-elect.
Nobody here felt boxed in by a tweet from the president-elect, and he's perfectly entitled to express his views on these kinds of things.
Trump then using Twitter to take aim at a major American company, defense contractor Lockheed Martin, threatening to replace the Pentagon's costly new F-35 fighter made by Lockheed with a less expensive plane made by Boeing, costing Lockheed Martin and its shareholders millions in market value. Despite backlash, Trump's team signaling that the president-elect will continue his use of Twitter.
He has a direct pipeline to the American people to talk to them in a way that no one's done before. I think it's fascinating.
Now, it's being reported that on a phone call with a journalist at another network, Trump responded to the tweet saying something to the effect of, quote, "Let it be an arms race. We will outmatch them at every pass." The interesting thing about this, Allison and Chris, is that it comes just a few hours after Vladimir Putin's State of the Union press conference with reporters in Russia, in which he said that Trump's comments about nukes are really nothing new. He also added later on that relations with the United States could not be worse.
All right, Boris, first, the best to you and your family for Christmas. Thank you for all the great reporting this year. Now, let's get to the bottom line with CNN senior political analyst David Axelrod. Let's start with the problem with Twitter playing out in real time, taking a serious, sensitive subject, trying to break it down into 140 characters. It creates confusion. Then he goes on the phone at MSNBC and he says, "Let there be an arms race. We'll beat them." Now we have to figure, Axe, was he talking about that as a policy position? Was he talking to a friend on the phone? How do you make sense of all this?
Well, it's almost more important how the world makes sense of all of this. You know, during the campaign, he at one point suggested that perhaps Japan and South Korea should become nuclear powers. He suggested, he said in answer to a question as to about nuclear weapons, if we why do we have them if we're not going to use them? Well, you know, for half a century, presidents from Kennedy through Reagan to Obama have made non-proliferation the focus of our policy. We have the ability to destroy the planet 1,000 times over. The our nuclear arsenal is in the process of being modernized, so he apparently did not know that when he tweeted. But what signal is he sending the world, and what does it mean for the world if proliferation and not non-proliferation becomes the order of the day? The other issue here, Chris, is just temperament. You know, even as he was being elected president November 8th, almost 2/3 of Americans said they doubted he had the temperament to be president. And this is one of the concerns, because right now he sends a tweet, we talk about it, it upsets people, and we move on. But in 28 days, he's going to have control of a nuclear arsenal. And when you press send on one of those, there's no deleting the account, there's no deleting the tweet or the attack. And so that is what is a real source of concern here.
Let's talk about something else that has gotten the attention of the international community, and that is a statement that he made about what was going to go on at the UN. Egypt wanted a UN resolution saying that the settlements, the Israeli settlements in Palestinian territory, are illegal and that they should end. Mr. Trump sent this out. As the United States has long maintained, peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians will only come through direct negotiations between the parties, not through the imposition of terms by the United Nations. This puts Israel in a very poor negotiating position. It's extremely unfair to all Israelis. David, how do you feel about him, you know, basically eclipsing whatever President Obama was planning to do about this?
Well, it's awkward at a time when the administrations are trying to work together on transition, but there are bigger implications here, Allison. One is that this comes on top of his appointment of an Israeli ambassador who has been an avid advocate for settlements over the Green Line and in disputed areas. And also they have signaled that they're going to do what other presidents have, which is move the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem. Also a hugely fraught issue in that region. So in a very tense region, before he's become president, he's sending us that will really unsettle, no pun intended, the situation there. And you know, these are very, very meaningful gestures, and you wonder how much thought has been given to them before he acts. Obviously, Prime Minister Netanyahu called him and asked him to do this. He did it, but I wonder how much consultation there's been among his people about whether this was wise.
Let's ping-pong back to the Russia-Putin situation again for a second, because again, I think we got to know more about the context of what the president-elect meant when he said, let there be an arms race. You know, very often these kinds of statements, they're all about context. You know, it's one thing if you're talking to me off camera or as somebody you expect some discretion from. It's another one if you think you're addressing the American people directly. But let's look at it in the context of what Vladimir Putin said to his people this morning. Nobody thought Trump would win except us. This is a man who loves to speak in code. Do you think he was dropping a hint there?
Well, I think I think Vladimir Putin is reveling in all of this speculation about what role he played in the American election and how large a role he played in the election of Donald Trump. He has great investment in the notion of instability in the Western alliance, in questions about democracy itself. So he is a preening peacock right now with all of this talk. What is concerning, and obviously Congress has to grapple with what happened during the election. What is concerning is the interplay between him and Donald Trump and what it means for American policy, and that remains to be seen.
You know, David, I think that many of Mr. Trump's supporters feel that they like this about Donald Trump, his unpredictability, the idea that he would keep foreign leaders like Putin and in China and in North Korea guessing. You never know exactly how he feels. You know, you don't want to set him off. That sort of feeling, I mean, they see that as a strength.
Yes, and in fact, he has been very, very consistent. He said throughout the campaign that he wants to be unpredictable in international relations. He doesn't want foreign leaders to know exactly what he's thinking. The problem with that is people act on what you say. I've said on this show and others, armies go marching, markets go tumbling based on what a president says. And we've seen it just in the last 48 hours. We've seen markets tumble for Lockheed Martin. We've seen the world unsettled by what he's said on a couple of different matters. It is dangerous. There are consequences to this. He's not a candidate anymore. And when you're President of the United States, your words have enormous weight. And so people may enjoy the spectacle now, but if it results in a war, if it results in some tragic misunderstanding, then they're going to have a different attitude.
Right. I mean, I really think it's a question of what we're talking about in terms of content, in terms of what his followers, the new they, like and don't like. It's one thing to mess with politicians, mess with the process over here. It's another thing to be talking about a nuclear arms race. You know, there's a good story that I'm sure you've heard, Axe, about President George W. Bush when he was introduced to the nuclear arsenal, that he was amazed by how many weapons we have, and he was quoted as saying, what do we need all of these for? You know, the idea of suggesting a nuclear arms race not only doesn't make a lot of sense given the threats that we're dealing with in today's world of terror, but it really speaks to a severity that is much different than just talking about a company and keeping jobs or, you know, asking for a different bid.
Well, as I said, we have an arsenal that can destroy the planet, 1,000 times over. So President Bush's question is a very apt one. The real concern is that if these weapons proliferate, it increases the likelihood that some non-state actor could get a hold of one of them, or someone, there can be a conflict that's triggered by misunderstanding. We saw that in the early 60s, how close we came to that. This is serious business. This is not a matter for impulsive tweets. And, this is going to be a very concerning 4 or 8 years if the president conducts foreign policy in this way. It's not, when you say, well, it matters what the context is, sometimes people don't wait for the context. Sometimes they act on the words. And I know I had a smile when Sean Spicer, the new press secretary, said, I find this fascinating. Fascinating is one way to put it. Frightening is another.
Right, but again, you got to give Trump, you got to give him the benefit of, let's see how he explains what he's quoted as saying on MSNBC. Because again, there's one thing about being on the phone with someone you trust, another one, context, is the message you want the American people to hear.
How would you like to be this morning, Jim Mattis and Rex Tillerson reading the newspaper and watch diplomats what the president meant? I wonder if they both were reveling in the joys of private life as they heard what their future may hold.
David Axelrod, thank you very much. Happy holidays.
Merry Christmas to you guys.
Thank you. You too. All right, we've been discussing this. Everyone wants to know exactly what Mr. Trump means in his tweets. We will ask the newly minted